Okay, it looks like we're ready to go technically, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the Independent Ethics Board for the City of Tallahassee. It is January the 15th at 4:01 p.m., and we're in the City Commission chambers. Announce the presence of a quorum. Mr. Smith is running just a couple of minutes late. I've been told to talk into the microphone, so I'm going to try to do that. We have a, I hope, fairly quick agenda for the first half. The second half is all focused on transition activities that we will be engaged in for the next month or two, since we are going to have a substantially new set of people sitting here at this desk. So the first item is the introduction of new members. We have our two new members tonight who were both here last month and got a chance to introduce themselves. But Ms. Graham, I recognize you if there's anything you'd like to say.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be a part of this board and have been doing my homework and learning as much as I can and looking for something that sort of struck me as the core of integrity and ethics and what we should all be looking for. And I was given this little card by our ethics officer. And there are a few questions on this card which you are to ask yourself if you're questioning whether you're making an ethical decision. And I would just go down to question number 3 as the one that says the most about what you should ask yourself by any action, by any elected official or anyone running for office or serving in office. In taking this action, how do I feel about myself? If the situation and my actions were in the newspaper, how would I feel about the publicity? I think that's the only question anyone running for office or serving in office should ask themselves. If you're okay with having it be on the front page of the Tallahassee Democrat, then you're okay with taking that action. And I look forward to being a member of this board. Thank you very much.
She is the state attorney's appointee to the board. And then the public defender's appointee, who is currently playing runner, Mr. Bouchon. I would recognize you, sir.
Thank you. It's kind of hard to follow Ms. Graham's with any new information. I would like to echo her sentiments. As I close out my 3rd decade of public service, it's an honor for me to be here as well, perhaps be a voice for the people in ethical governance. So thank you.
Thank you. He is the public defender's appointee. We have 2 vacancies. One is the city appointee, who we expect will be here for the February meeting. I believe they are going to schedule to take action on January 30th. And the other is a member that is to be appointed by the sitting members of this board, and we will talk about that later on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any questions or corrections on the minutes? Ms. McNeil moves the adoption of the minutes, and I'm going to second since I was here as a member. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. The next item is the ethics officer report. For our new members, this is a series of items that can range from about 4 to about 7. So you will see these types of items month after month. We deal with each one of them separately at the end of each page or each document. We will take a short break, allow any public testimony, allow the members to ask questions or make comments. So Ms. Meadows-Keefe, you are recognized on your report for the month of December.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as you've indicated, and for the benefit of the members, this is a recurring report that happens every month. Some activities you will see repeat month to month. Others are unique depending on the month. And so, for example, this month I did have the pleasure of meeting with and orienting 2 new board members and getting to know them and familiarizing them with our process. As you know, we also do have a vacancy for our board council. So we've been thinking about that. And then also the process for filling out the board. I also had the pleasure, along with Pat Gleason Chris Anderson from the Florida Ethics Commission, and the Honorable Josephina Tamayo to present an ethics education to the city leadership. Ms. Amy Toman there in the front row also helped to put that on. And this is a recurring tradition in the city since I came in 2014, that the new year is started with education on ethics for leadership. So we were able to put together a 4-hour class with outside help, including a panel discussion that I think people participated in, a nice, robust discussion. So that was a highlight of the month. And the various other issues. For the benefit of the new members, you'll notice that you occasionally get press clips from me, and that's something I do that the board decided they would like for them to receive stories that may involve ethics and that may be important for you all to know. So I curate those. I don't just forward them. So I take a look at the clips and forward ones that I think you may be interested in. So that's why you're getting those if I haven't told you. And just the various things I do. I do a monthly ethics training for employees. That takes about 2 hours every month to do. And then I do introduction to ethics at benefit orientation. So that concludes the report on that, unless there are questions.
Any questions of Ms. Meadows-Keefe? I would point out, related to the news clips, that the board, one of the decisions the board made fairly early on with the advice of board counsel was that we have the ability to self-initiate a complaint. So we don't have to wait for a third party, anonymous or otherwise, to make some information known to us. If any of us sees something, we can raise it to the board, and the board can, on its own initiative, begin an activity related to a self-initiated complaint. I need to apologize, Mr. Batzine, as I was organizing the speaker's cards, I noticed that you had numbered item 2 on the agenda. So I would recognize you now, sir, if you'd like that to be recognized. This was on introduction of new members.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Batzine. I'm here on behalf of Common Cause Florida and also the Citizens Coalition for Ethics Reform. We have here our component parts: Ben Wilcox of Integrity Florida, Catherine Bear of the Tea Party Network, and Marilyn Wills with the League of Women Voters, Tallahassee League of Women Voters. I mention this because a couple of you know us well, but for the new people on the board, we have been instrumental in passing the Ethics Charter Amendment back some 4 years ago. We have also been active in ensuring its proper implementation. We attend most of these meetings, and I'm happy to come before you today. I'd like to welcome the new members, Gwen Graham and Lee Bushong. I thank them for their service. We're delighted that you are now part of the Ethics Board. We look forward to having vacancies filled soon, for the vacancies to be filled by the City Commission and the open at-large seat. It's the New Year's, and it's appropriate to have New Year's resolutions. So I'm going to present some New Year's resolutions for your consideration today. Not since the Ethics Board was originally constituted have there been so many newly appointed members to this board, or vacancies that will need to be filled. And as a reflection of his past leadership, his encouragement of public participation, and to maintain consistency, our coalition has full confidence in Mr. Herring, and we hope that he will be able to continue as chair. And he didn't put me up for that. I guarantee it. He did not put me up. I have
heavy objects, and I can throw that far.
The second recommendation that we have, or, as it were, a New Year's resolution is, I'd like to encourage Julie, as the ethics officer, to add more specificity to her monthly reports. For instance, her most recent report indicated that she met with a city commissioner. Well, that begs the question, which commissioner, what was the topic? She met with the city auditor on several issues. Well, what were those issues? I think they would be of interest to the public and to the board. She consulted with board counsel. Well, about what? Again, of interest to the public and the board. So we'd encourage more specificity in those monthly reports from the ethics officer. We also encourage this board to engage in a proactive search for legal counsel who has the knowledge, the temperament, and the independence to serve this ethics board. And Mr. Wilcox is going to address this issue further in his remarks and address it with more specificity. We urge you to finalize the present blue sky, so-called blue skies ethics reform, to the City Commission as soon as possible. And that's because in the wake of recent scandals, citizens are demanding more accountability and frankly wondering why the ethics board isn't taking more aggressive action. And this results in our defending the board by pointing out that a majority of previous commissioners were outright hostile to providing the board with the legal tools necessary to enforce our notoriously weak and ineffective ethics ordinances. The commission now has changed. Our coalition interviews with all but one of the current commissioners indicated strong interest in tackling the culture of lax ethics that plagues Tallahassee. Over 4 years ago, when I first appeared before this board and the City Commission, I quoted a phrase from 17th century Puritan John Winthrop, who proclaimed that Boston would soon become a city upon the hill, an example to all nations. And I pointed out that the city of Tallahassee could and should also become a city upon the hill for Florida and our nation, providing an example for impeccable ethics in campaign finance reform. And I believe the time is ripe for this board and the City Commission to at last realize the vision of a city upon a hill. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Batzine? We will see again.
Yeah, and forgive my ignorance. I'm fairly new to the city of Tallahassee. You indicate blue skies and some aggressive action. Educate me for a moment on what blue skies is, please.
They are part of the packet that you have today. Blue sky, I think that term was coined by your chairman, who sees these as kind of, what can come next in terms of improving the ethics ordinances. And I can tell you the ethics ordinances in Tallahassee are very, very weak. And therefore, you have not had the tools to do your job. And I read through the latest list of blue sky recommendations. They might say, well, they're pie in the sky. But I would say that these recommendations are important for the future enforcement of ethics in Tallahassee. And I would encourage you to consider them very carefully. If you adopted the blue sky recommendations that I'm looking at, you would be you would serve the citizens very well.
Thank you.
And we'll discuss that in more detail when we get to item 6 on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Batzine.
Thank you.
We'll go back now to item 4. Ms. Meadows-Keefe, the next item on the agenda is the monthly tracking report. Has items 153 and 154. If you would describe those for us, please, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there were 2 items this month that were received. Both involved the CRA, and these were not within the scope of the board's authority. One was involving a contract, and one was involving fund distribution. So my recommendation was to close those items.
Okay, any objection from any board member? What I would like to do, Ms. Meadows-Keefe, is because the nature of the CRA and the relationship of the county and the city in the CRA or participation has changed, when we have a board attorney, I would like to put an item on the agenda for the board to discuss asking the attorney to look at the nature of the CRA and this board's jurisdiction, specifically as it relates to city officials who might participate either directly or indirectly with or through the CRA, so that we are taking these kinds of concerns as seriously as we can within our jurisdiction. The next item, Ms. Meadows-Keefe, is our monthly budget. Members, we will see this every month. It'll show you kind of what our annual budget is. Remember, we're on an October 1 to September 30 local government budget cycle. The City Commission has been kind enough to give us an adequate budget to deal with all the things that we have needed to deal with so far, and they have maintained that even though we have had some extra, particularly in the area of campaign contribution refunds, so that we believe we are set up to deal with anything that comes our way. Ms. Meadows-Keefe.
The only thing that I would point out is that there was the annual pension contribution made this last month, so that accounts for that rather significant chunk there.
That's, which line is that?
That is line number 515000.
Okay, it's the one that's shaded.
Yep.
So that is the expense is not a monthly expense; it's an annual expense.
Correct.
Okay. And Ms. McNeil is nodding. She's the one that if she's nodding, then I know that we're not going to jail over budget items.
I would hope not.
Something else for a future agenda. I don't know whether or not this board, being independent, is subject to the city auditor. But if you would, on a future agenda, would you maybe think about that a little bit, and also think about we are starting our 5th year in operation. It would be my view, as a recommendation to the board, that by the end of this year, we ought to, if we can't get an audit from the city auditor, we ought to go buy our own audit of our activities. I think after a 5-year startup period, we're probably due for something like that, and I think it would be wise for us to do that. But again, I know we can get sage advice here locally, and I don't know what our relationship with the city auditor, but I think we ought to make sure that we're subject to some scrutiny, as well as the kind of scrutiny we deliver. We ought to receive some. Next item is we look at public records requests that are received by the city, and Ms. Meadows-Keefe supplies us with those. Typically, they will be there. I think there's a more detailed list, maybe, that was laid on the desk for you. That's several pages long. That has some shaded out names, so we don't identify individuals unnecessarily. The shorter list that was included with the agenda materials, the one-pager that has items 94 through 106, these are ones that have been pulled out as more significant. They're not just asking for somebody's utility bill for a certain address. They're ones that go fall more in the nature of politics, elections, ethics, those kinds of things. So, Ms. Meadows-Keefe.
To further elaborate on what the chair said, that there are certain public records requests that are sent to the leadership to kind of be aware that these are issues that people are asking about. So we do pull those out as ones to look at in a little bit more detail, or just for people to be aware of. Others are more commonplace. So that's why there's 2 different lists. And the reason why the board takes the initiative to just take a look at these is there have been comments about potentially the board looking outside to see what people are concerned about, and this is one way to measure that. So that's the reason those appear.
So again, if there's anything that appears on any of these lists that you would like more information on, we should be able to get a copy of the city's response, because that would be a response to a public records request. You can always raise that in a public meeting, or you can, in between meetings, talk to Ms. Meadows-Keefe for her to get more information if there's something we want to pursue. And this would, again, fall in the category of we can self-initiate a complaint. Ms. Graham.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, when a public records request comes into the city, who is handling that?
Mr. Chair, may?
Please.
Okay. When a public records request comes into the city, it comes to the treasurer clerk's office, and then it is distributed out, I guess, for the person if they have things to compile. But for emails and things like that, a search can be done and those compiled. But the Treasurer Clerk's Office is the central point of contact for public records requests.
So the city has software that searches for whatever keyword the public records request triggers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so who is making the decision that it rises to the level of being brought to the Ethics Board's attention?
We just bring all of them.
Okay. And so then you're reviewing them to see if there's additional action that we need to be potentially made aware of a need for.
We provide them, or I provide them for the board members to look at to see
All
if
of
there's,
them?
yeah. So
Not the answers, just the requests.
just the requests themselves.
Okay.
This list.
Okay.
It's a barometer of what the public's interested in.
Oh, I know. Little background on me. I worked very extensively with public records at the Leon County School District, so it's something that I'm familiar with. So this is the list. Is this a normal number of? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, 10 to 15 a month that sort of rise to, that are more information about the FBI investigation or background or follow-up on those kinds of things that are more newsworthy, again, than somebody's utility bill for the month of March at a particular ad.
So there's not a filter being done at the city level that we get all of them?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Gwen?
Not during the meeting.
Stand, I don't go on formalities very easily, but okay.
The other thing for the new board members, the city instituted a policy a couple months ago in relation, as a result of a negotiated settlement with the Tallahassee Democrat, where any communications that occur off of the city email system, let's say that you were a utility worker and somebody sent you, for whatever reason, had your phone number and sent you a text on your private phone, they forward all of that to the city. They are now required to do that to make sure that all of those public records that are in the nature of electronic communications all get collected in one place and don't have to be maintained by the individual employees, since they're all public records.
And, Mr. Chair, the responsibility is placed on the city employee to forward?
Yes, we can get you a copy of that policy. It's a fairly short thing. It's about a half a page, where they went through and made it the responsibility of everybody who works for the city. If they get something that addresses city business and they receive it on any kind of personal device or outside of normal city communications channels, they are required to keep that. And I know the Democrat, I think, both initiated that and worked on or approved how it was implemented.
And this is part of the ethics training that they receive, that they're required to do this? Okay, thank you.
And in fact, the city was written about in the Florida Bar Journal, or how, it turned a situation where they weren't able to compile all the records necessary.
Right.
They called it lemons into lemonade, basically. So now the way that they handle public records requests is actually an example for others to look at. So they learned from the past and implemented change, and now it's being used as an example for other jurisdictions.
Thank you.
Ms. Meadows-Keefe, is that the end of your report? Or is there
The public records section, yes, sir, it is.
Okay. And is there more to the ethics officer? Is there more to agenda item 4?
I did have, just for your information, there is an item that you asked me to include.
Oh, right. This is the complaint?
That's correct.
I think everyone's familiar with the complaint that Dr. Jackson has made about the appointment of the new city commissioner. We provided it because it affects folks who will be deciding the future of our jurisdiction, among other things. We've provided it for you. It's not burdensomely long. It's, about a dozen pages or so, 10 pages. But if anybody has any questions, and I see Dr. Jackson is here, and he may well have something to say about, I don't know what you're here for, but we can either ask questions of the ethics officer or of Dr. Jackson on that, if anyone has any. Seeing none. Anything else in your? Well,
there was also a sheet that described the applicants for the Independent Ethics Board and the methodology that would be utilized to select those individuals and the deadlines. And so since this is on TV and maybe people are watching that are interested.
Would you just go over the deadlines, please?
Yeah, exactly. January 25th, 2019 by 1:00 p.m. for the seat to be filled by the City Commission. There's also a deadline that's a little later for the at-large seat. That's the one filled by the board, Wednesday, February 6th at 5 p.m. But what's going to happen there, just so, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later. I don't want to steal thunder, but there will be applications compiled on the 25th. People will still be able to submit applications for our consideration, and we're going to get the whole batch. So the commission will pick its person, and then whoever doesn't get picked, all those applications will go to the board members. And typically what I'll do is send you all a packet of all the applicants for you to look at. And the chair will talk about more about that in a minute.
Okay. So for anybody watching, those are the two critical dates. If you want the City Commission to appoint you to this board, you need to get your application in by 1 p.m. on Friday, January 25th. If you want to be considered by this board for us to appoint you as a member, it needs to be submitted by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, February 6th. Go ahead.
Okay, and there's one final item that did not make it onto the agenda because it was relatively new, and that is that there had not been, up to this point, a deputy city manager. There had just been various assistant city managers, but this week, the city manager did appoint Cynthia Barber to be the deputy city manager. And I think she's actually appeared before this board to chat with you about what her responsibilities are. I may need to get her back so that she can meet the new members. And maybe that'll be later once we get the seats filled. But that's just a point of information for you that we now have a deputy city manager.
And Mr. Batsine, I have a card for you on item 4, or did you cover that? You covered it. Okay, we're good on that. That takes us to item 5. We call this ethics moment. One of the things we were concerned about was that we, primarily through Ms. Meadows-Keefe, deliver a good bit of ethics training, and we thought we ought to receive some, and rather than, while we do a once-a-year bite of an hour or so, what we've tried to do is take 5 to 10 minutes at each meeting and just talk about one ethics issue. Of course, you can always bring any issue you want to bring, or you can ask Ms. Meadows-Keefe at the next month to make sure to cover a particular topic. But this sort of keeps our hand in the receiving training capacity. So, Ms. Meadows-Keefe, this is on the ethics moment, institutionalization of ethical conduct requirements.
Correct. And so I saw this in looking at some other items I was reviewing for the meeting, and I have noted this, that in the private sector, there are corporations that are appointing ethics officers to actually police corporate ethics. So I would hate to say that it's a trend, but it does seem to be a trend that's catching on even in the public sector. And I felt that it was educational for the board in that it looks at the different responsibilities of an ethics officer and what the job description should or shouldn't include, including reporting requirements, qualifications, whether that individual needs to have a finance background or a legal background, and some of the things that they are to do. And some of the things have common threads with this board and with my responsibilities or the responsibilities of this position, including development of ethics policies and education. So this was just basically a point of information for you all to know that it's just not something that's present in the government. It's also catching on in the private sector. People wanting to do business with companies that adhere to certain ethical policies.
And I would add, in terms of ethics in the private sector, if you go to any of the online booksellers and look for books on ethics, you'll find, obviously, ethics in nursing, which you would expect. You'll find ethics in electrical contracting, which maybe you wouldn't expect, but makes some sense. You'll also find ethics in bodybuilding and ethics in a variety of sports. And just about anything that you can think of, there's a book that someone thought it was worth writing on ethics and that occupation or hobby. So it is thoroughly infused in our society at this point. Okay, that moves us to item 6, the Blue Sky recommendations. Let me give you a little bit of background. In, good Lord, when was it? 2016, the board had jurisdiction that was so limited that it was almost non-existent. So the board decided to make some recommendations to the City Commission to expand our jurisdiction. Those recommendations got expanded beyond that to be recommendations not only related to our jurisdiction, but recommendations related to city policy and city ordinance, recommendations to the board itself in terms of how we could be more transparent. And we came out with a set of recommendations that addressed everything from the city charter down to our own operating procedures. While it took better part of a year, the City Commission ultimately did adopt some change to our jurisdiction, and many of the other things that we recommended got addressed one way or another, either by them or by us. So about last July, August, we decided as a board, it was time to start that process again to go ahead, knowing the election was coming and there would be some new faces, seeing more and more in the paper about the kinds of problems that the board members thought they ought to have some jurisdiction over, which they didn't. We began this idea of compiling a list of things we might do, and the idea of Blue Sky, Mr. Bichon, came from the concept that we would take any idea from anybody without limitation. If it was not constitutional, didn't matter, it was going to go on the list. If it was something we couldn't afford, didn't matter, it was going to go on the list. We wanted to not filter anything that went on the list. And we began, as you remember from our last meeting, we began to squeeze the list down a little bit. So we took a number of things off of the list that people decided probably weren't things we wanted to do. One of the items was you could save money by not televising these meetings, for instance. Right. People decided that wasn't a good idea. So what you have in front of you is the Blue Sky list. As it currently sits, it's probably not relevant to call it a Blue Sky list anymore. It's probably more relevant to call it a draft set of recommendations. These include everything from expanding the jurisdiction of this board to changes in city policy in terms of ethical activities to some recommendations to the board in terms, again, of our openness and our responsiveness to people. Some of them we control, some of them obviously the City Commission would control. The goal would be, and as I think the ethics advocates, for us to get this out as quickly as possible. Given that we have 2 new members at this meeting, at least 1 new member, maybe 2 new members at the next meeting, I would suggest that it's probably time to sit back, take a breath, and wait a month to give everyone a chance to digest these things. I'm certainly happy to talk about it. I see Dr. Jackson, I have a card from you on this agenda item. You're recognized, sir.
Irwin Jackson, 1341 Jackson Bluff. I've been absent here for a few months, a couple months, and I apologize for that. Bought an RV park over in Marianna on October 4th. Has 200 sites, 45 boat slips, a restaurant, a bar, a few other things. And on the 10th, it got smashed by a hurricane. So I've been dealing with the insurance company. We lost about $450,000. But I'm still very concerned about what goes on here, so I'm not quite appropriately dressed to be here, but I left over there working. Blue Sky. Here's what I've recommended in the past. Here's what I think is a very simple solution. This is what I've spent personally a lot of time as well as money trying to encourage to make you folks' lives easy. I would take the recommendations that you have in Blue Sky, set it right over here on the side. You have, guarantee, enough votes on the City Commission. They have personally stated they would, and if not, that'll give me something else to talk to them about, that they would like for the chairman in this committee to sit down and you write, and I've given you a name of a couple of individuals who have written ethics policies, and so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I had one written and paid for. There's a couple other attorneys here in town that have done this before. Don't try to fix and tweak this, tweak that. Write a completely new ethics policy with real teeth. What you're working under is almost worthless. As a person who's come up here, when I see corruption or when I see the city commission thinking that the operating in the sunshine is optional, I had a choice. Am I going to bring it here and mess around, and even if something may work out, but we don't have any teeth, or do you just sue the son of a guns? Well, I just sued him. And I'll invite each of you on Thursday at 1:30. The judge will be ruling, and I think we'll have a very positive result. But as a private citizen, that's an expensive proposition that I have to spend my time and money to sue. You folks have the opportunity. I would ask, you can write a letter to the city commission saying, we'd like to write a brand new ethics ordinance with no input from the city commission. That's the other part of what I've been promised. No input. Because there's a conflict of interest if they tell you what should go into an ethics commission that they're going to have to live under. So this body needs to take the authority that they have. Send them a letter. Say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to write one, and we'd like to have your blessing. No input, just your blessing. Then let's get busy and do it. Messing with, trying to add to a piece of ordinance that started out exempting city commissioners from the ethics law, we're in trouble. So that's the first thing, and they've agreed to give you the authority. Just stand up and take it. Second thing on my mind, I wanted to welcome both our two new commissioners. And Commissioner Graham, I just want to say a couple things. First is I met your father years ago when he was running for governor, and he gave me one of his little crackers.
Where is it? It's not on your jacket.
Pardon?
Where is it? You should have it on your jacket.
Well, that's put away in a safe place. But I do appreciate, I didn't wear that when I was working today. But anyway, I always thought a lot of him. And secondly, after saying that and how important that was, he was one of the first politicians I've ever dealt with and got very committed with, and I think he did a wonderful job. Secondly, though, is the second part of this, is one of the things I like to see in the ethics policy. I don't believe we should limit certain people to be on this ethics commission. Now, after I said that nice thing, I want to tell you why I don't think you should be on that seat. Okay? I don't think any politician should be on the ethics board. I don't think any lobbyist should be on the ethics board. One thing I've seen in the last 9.5 years of looking at politicians and lobbyists and corruption in City Hall. And this is not saying at all that you're like all other politicians. I'm just saying there's certain certain types of clientele. Because people have been lobbyists, this is not, an ethics commission is not the place for someone who's had a history of being a lobbyist. The same thing as far as a politician. Politicians, I think, kind of fall in that same category of lobbyists, and I think a lot of other different types of criteria could be used, other kinds of businesses, other kind of school teachers, bus drivers. Give me a plumber. Give me someone who doesn't have, and I'm just questionable on attorneys, to let you know on that. But sometimes we may need to have a few. Anyway, those are two thoughts. Now, you're going to hire a new attorney up here. When you're looking for an attorney, let's don't go out. And if you remember, a few months ago, I complained about one of the one of the commissioners that was hired because he's married to a very well-known politician who has a city contract. All right, let's don't have people who have city contracts on the Ethics Commission, okay? If we're going to hire an attorney, let's don't hire an attorney from a big law firm that has contracts with the city, that does lobbying for the city or the state. Let's find an attorney, has his own private practice. He's not so entwined with the operation of the city. That's the second thing. I have a couple other things I don't think is relevant, necessary to the blue sky. You need the teeth. I will say this. Rick Fernandez, and we know what happened to Rick Fernandez. Again, I'm spending more money and my time. It's worthwhile, but if you would do and write your new ordinance, then you could deal with Rick Fernandez. I could come in here and say, hey, the city commission is operating, but they're operating in a back room. Well, we can't do that. You need a lot more authority than what you have. Rick Fernandez, if you remember, we came in here and I told you about the tickets, I told you about this. Well, you turned around and you gave it to the city manager to go ahead and do a review. And the city manager, not surprisingly, came up with the value of those $350 tickets, and I buy 8 of them, were $99. Because if they're 100, then it's unethical. All right? Now, you have to smile when you see that. Why Reese Goad is still the city manager, I think there's a problem. Off the topic, I'll deal with that later. I have 2 other comments regarding other issues I think you ought to hear about. And I would strongly encourage you. They're willing to give you all the authority you want. And if you don't stand up, and if this commission doesn't say, oh, yeah, it's easy, you can blame the city now, because you can say, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. But I'm telling you here, they're willing to let you write anything you want in there, and then it's your responsibility. You put the penalties in there, and then it's your responsibility to enforce it. You won't be able to say, oh, we can't do anything. I'm sick and tired after 4 or 5 years. And I was really involved in getting this started 4 or 5 years ago. And it's time that you guys stand up. You have the authority if you just simply ask for it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Any questions, Dr. Jackson?
May I, Chair?
Please.
Okay, Dr. Jackson, Dr. Lee Bouchong. I want to address, I don't know you, okay? I don't know anybody here. I'm fairly new in town, all right? And so other board members, forgive me.
Most politicians are glad if they don't know me.
Well, wouldn't put myself in that category. You brought 2
either.
things up, 2 things that I want to address. All right, you stood here before us and you said, you need a policy. You need to take that action.
Yes.
Dr. Jackson, I charge you, provide me what you think is a good policy.
I've already done that about 6-7 years ago. I spent about $8,000-9,000 of my money. I gave the policy in detail. I gave it to...
Do we have it?
I have it.
Get you a copy.
Will you get me a copy? Okay.
Absolutely. I've got that taken care of, and I've got a legal team that would be glad to assist you.
Very good. That would be unethical from this position to accept such an offer.
No.
However,
No, I'm talking about the
it.
legal team as if you have a committee to put this together to assist you in putting together this ethics policy. That's all I'm saying.
Very good. And the second thing is I understand your concerns about politicians. I don't know Gwen.
Some are wonderful and some are not.
However, her seat was invested to the discretion and the authority of Mr. Campbell. And Mr. Campbell appointed her here. And I trust Mr. Campbell, and I would wager to say that all members of the community would have to abide by that confidence that we gave to him. So,
I don't have that confidence.
Ms. Graham, I just wanted to say from my perspective down here, welcome.
Sure.
Well, I appreciate that, and though I don't know Dr. Jackson personally well, I give you my 100% commitment that I will conduct myself always with the highest ethical commitment that we all should hold. And I think that at the beginning of this meeting, I stated that to me, the number one criteria that anyone running for office or serving in office should look to is, are you saying or doing anything that would put you on the front page of the Tallahassee Democrat? You don't want to say or do in any kind of a negative way. If it's positive, great.
Right.
Front page above the fold, Jeff. But I appreciate your comments and concerns, and I completely want you to know they're unfounded.
Well, and my comments were not directed to her specifically. My comments were directed at any politician and any lobbyist. And my comments are, so it's not a personal thing. When I filed my legal action against the city of Tallahassee regarding not following and operating in the sunshine, it had nothing to do with the person that they selected. It's the process they used. That's a big difference.
I understand.
So there's nothing personal. I think it's a bad policy to put people on an ethics board when they're politicians. I think it's a bad policy to put lobbyists on here, especially when you read in a paper, and after 9 years of my experience, problems, when they occur, seem to have to do with lobbyists, politicians, money, and some crooked business owners. Okay, and that's what we ought to try to separate that. But I appreciate the questions.
Well, Dr. Jackson, I just want to say, it used to be that politicians had there was a positive reaction. My father...
He certainly did.
And we need to get back to that.
That would be wonderful.
We absolutely need to get back to those in elected office,
right,
that people react positively. Yes, Stanley, that people react positively when they know that they have trust in those that are elected to serve the people.
Right.
So I want you to recognize that I appreciate your comments,
right,
but don't lump everybody into the same group.
Well, I think when we have we should establish criteria for people to be on this board. Okay, I wouldn't put a bank robber probably here. You know what I'm saying? But the point being, the negative image that politicians now have in Tallahassee,
well, let's change it,
are well deserved. There are more indictments that will come. There's more people going to prison. So we can't get over this until we get through it.
Well, let's change that and have people who are in elected office who have the trust and the commitment to doing what's right for the people always, which is my commitment. And I'm not running.
Wonderful.
So I appreciate your comments, but I also am so honored to have been asked to serve in this capacity by the state attorney, and I appreciate his confidence in me.
Right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, as follow-up, I'm going to ask Ms. Meadows-Keefe to send those recommendations from some years back to each member of the board. I'm sure I have them. Putting my hands on them is another matter. And since you, Dr. Jackson, you were not here at the last meeting, Dr. Bichong and the other people, who I think, Ms. Graham, you were here also, we had instructed our board attorney to actually draft language so that we would not be in the recommendations that we intend to make will not be general policy recommendations. They will actually be draft language on these topics. If the commission would adopt all of them, that would be great. But we're not going to give them concepts. We are going to give them concrete language. That's one reason that board attorney becomes important for us.
And all I'm saying is I would do the whole thing.
Yes, sir. I understand. You would do it as a package.
Redo, write it, set it over here, and because the fact that you go up and ask them, okay, you're asking them to approve this or to go along with a concept. The point being, don't ask them for anything. They're willing to give you the authority to write it. So with the new folks, write the ordinance. Look at the ones that's already been provided to you. They have teeth in there. Don't make it more complicated, because take the whole thing and then you be responsible for getting it written, and then you be responsible for coming up with the ordinances and the enforcement, and put some teeth in it. So instead of me having to spend my money or going to the State Ethics Commission or filing my own lawsuits, then we can have trust that we'll give it to you and you have the authority, and you're not going to turn around and give it to the city manager and ask him to investigate. Right. That's unbelievable. Thank you.
Heard. So going back to this list, unless the members have an objection, I would like to delay this until we have all of our members. I think our recommendations now, and I'm going to ask Mr. Batsine to come up next, but in my view, our recommendations will carry more weight if they are unanimous coming from a fully appointed board. And I particularly would be concerned that we make a set of recommendations and subsequently get a new member who goes, I don't like one of those. That seems to me to be cutting off our nose to spite our face.
Agree. And I also, Mr. Chair, believe having the time to fully review the Blue Sky recommendations and any other potential ethical language that we should consider, I would appreciate that opportunity.
As would I.
Right, and again, what the goal is, we've got this list narrowed down somewhat, but the goal is to come back with actual drafted language.
Right.
So we don't just have something that says subpoenas. We actually have the language that would go in the charter that would give us subpoena power, specifically drafted in a way that we know is constitutional. There is some case law in this. We were advised by our prior board attorney, so that we know that it is as strong as we need it to be and that it is competently drafted.
Mr. Chair, where are we at in that draft process?
We would have been somewhere if we still had a board attorney, but as you know, our board attorney got appointed to be the secretary of a state agency, and so she basically didn't get started on it before the governor appointed her. So before we see that language, we probably need a board attorney. We can get Ms. Meadows-Keefe to do some of it, but some of this is there's a level of drafting ordinances that I think in the past we have used our board attorney, our prior board attorney, to do some of that work for us. And I think to make sure that we are that we recommend draft ordinances that are bulletproof. We need to rely on that legal expertise, which we at the moment, given that empty chair next to you, do not have.
Understood. One more question then for Ms. Julie. When would I be able to, or expect to be able to see Dr. Jackson's proposal?
Oh, well, assuming that I can locate it expeditiously, which I think I can. Dr. Jackson was kind enough to provide me with that. I think my second or third day at work. If those are the same ones, if they haven't changed, I'm seeing a nod of assent from Dr. Jackson. I should be able to have those to you in the next few days. And then I'm going to provide them actually to all of y'all board members to review. And we can discuss when the chair deems appropriate.
Thank you.
I haven't changed any.
Okay.
Still pushing it, even though I didn't know it's been 5 years ago. It's even more needed now than it was 5 years ago.
For the purpose of the audio, Dr. Jackson is saying he has not changed them since what he originally submitted.
And it was given to every city commissioner 5 years ago, and every one of them with a resounding no, but even hell no, and over my dead body will this become law. So that kind of gives you a background of where we were 5 years ago. Now, every commissioner up there is in favor of something brand new that you come up with. Thank you.
Mr. Batsine, you're recognized, sir.
Just let me say, I had recommended that the board act as soon as possible, and it sounds to me as though this is as soon as possible. I do agree that this is important work. It needs to be done carefully, and I think it needs to be done with the unanimous approval of this board. And I appreciate the bind that the chair is in. With the loss of the council and with the not having a fully formed board, I realize the need to take some extra time. And we will certainly be here to help with that process.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sims.
my name is Stanley Sims,
sir.
1320 Avondale. Also, I recognize the predicament situation with missing board, but we have a jewel in this community that we mentioned when we switched with the attorneys. And I think that this is a prime opportunity to bring him back and to at least in this time till we secure an attorney. And then this way, I love the fact of bringing the old attorney back because he is knowledgeable of what history things until we bring on the new one. Or I like that consistency. I don't know why they're shaking their heads in the back. Is the man dead or gone? I don't know about what. The old attorney before we had her.
Currington.
No, not permanently. I didn't say bring him back, but just through this here ethics review, we have an attorney. We could still be moving forward, and we have someone who has the history of this here. And maybe I know y'all know something I don't know because I'm usually riding with them, so they said no.
Okay, well, we're about
so
to.
I might need to.
Thank you. We're about to go into a discussion of exactly that. The next several items on the board all relate to our transition, and I gave you on everyone's desk, and there are copies on the back table since it was not in our agenda, this one-page sheet that I did kind of to organize my thoughts on. It's titled Transition Activities, January 2019. We have 4 things, it seems to me, that all interrelate. One is selecting a new board chair. The other is selecting a new board-appointed member. Third is selecting a board attorney. And fourth is the possibility of an additional meeting. So as we move into the rest of the agenda, let me just lay out a few options for us. I think in terms of the board chair is normally selected in January to conduct, in December to conduct the January meeting so that they can actually, they don't have to step into a meeting where they didn't set the agenda and have any chance to talk to Ms. Meadows-Keefe about it. We did not select a new board chair last month because we only had 3 members returning in January, so we delayed it till this month. We at least have 5 members now, so we have, it seems to me, 2 options when we get to this, the next item on the agenda. One is to go ahead and select the new chair and vice chair, and notice I say new chair and vice chair, and the other is that we can delay that decision until we have all 7 board members. Related to that is the appointment of the 7th board member that will be selected by the 6 of us, because at our if we have our next meeting after January 30th, we will have the new city-appointed member. We know that the applications for the member that this board will appoint, the deadline is February 6th. Julie will send those applications, all the applications that are timely received, to all of us. And the way we've done this in the past, there may be 20 or 30 of them. You get the joy of going through them. We will come in a public meeting. Everybody will say who their top choices are, and we will select among those top choices and appoint a board member. Ms. Meadows-Keefe.
I will say that the only winnowing that occurs is there are qualifications for board members that are set forth in the charter and in our bylaws, and that's that you reside within city limits and are a registered voter in the city. So there is winnowing, and I do get questions from people that don't live in city limits and they're disappointed. So if you hear that someone applied and you don't see their name, it's for that reason.
But otherwise, there's no pre-screening. You will get every qualified applicant who applies, or you will get the application of every qualified person who applies. So that, again, is something that we will need to do presumably at our next meeting. Selecting a board attorney, there are 4 possible paths for us to go down. One is the path that we followed when we selected the original board attorney back 4 years ago, and that was that one member of the board went out, interviewed a few people, selected one, brought that person to this before the board. We did an interview of sorts, and the board voted to appoint that person, Jerry Currington, as the board counsel. The second is that we just hired a new board attorney. We got applications in just last September, and I think it was it September or October? We selected.
She started in September.
I'm sorry. We got the applications in August and selected her for the September meeting. So we still have, I believe there were 3 other applications. We still have those. We could go back to those and select from those. There is no formal bid process required for legal services. A third option is that we could simply put an ad in the newspaper, call whoever we want to call, see who we get. I'm assuming the 3 people who were unsuccessful last time would probably apply, or the 3 firms would probably apply, and we might get a couple of new names. And the fourth option would be to do what we did last time, which is use the city's RFP process, which I would suggest, I think we learned was probably an overly cumbersome process, and it took probably too long. And my personal view is that the members of this board ought to make a decision rather than turn some of it over to city employees to review and rank. But those are going to be it seems to me, and there may be other options, but it seems to me those are the 4 things we have to talk about. And then in addition to that, item 2, selecting the new board member, and item 3, selecting the new board attorney, we could wait and do those in our February meeting. We will have all the material for our February meeting. Or if, because people are concerned that we move forward with the blue sky list, or with our recommendations, our draft recommendations, if we want to move more expeditiously, we could hold a non-monthly meeting. There were 2 dates, Ms. Meadows-Keefe, I believe you sent me, that we could get space to hold a meeting, and what were those?
Okay, so I asked Ms. Adkins to take a look at, first of all, the space and times available, and so I came up with Thursday, February the 7th, between 5 and 8 o'clock p.m., and then Monday, February 11th, 2019, from 5 to 8 o'clock. I'll state that our next scheduled meeting is February 19th, but if we were to schedule a special meeting with that very limited agenda, there's a possibility that we could start our February meeting with at least maybe 2 new board members.
7 members and a board.
And a board council. So that's the plus side to doing it if board members can fit that into their schedules.
Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to go through on the rest of the agenda. And Mr. Betzine, did you have something here? Oh, okay. Mr. Wilcox, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I just wanted to address this issue of selecting the board attorney. We feel, Citizens for Ethics Reform, that there is a sense of urgency about finding a new board counsel, and we would urge you to consider either option 1 or option 3. I think that would move us more quickly in a direction that we would have a board counsel. Also would urge you to consider the fact that you are an independent ethics board, and you don't need to go through the hiring process that you went through the last time with the city protocols and that kind of thing. I think you can go out and recruit the board or the board council that you want or desire. One of the great things about living in the city of Tallahassee is that we have a talent pool here of people who have served in all levels of government. I for one, think it's great that we have a former congressman that is willing to serve on the ethics board. But I would ask you to keep that in mind when you're going out and soliciting applications for the board council. One potential attorney that I would suggest you consider, and we would all support, is Phil Claypool, who's a former executive director, former general counsel with the Florida Commission on Ethics, has decades of experience with ethics law, and could potentially, I think, draft your proposed ethics code in his sleep, basically. So that's it.
Okay, any questions, Mr. Wilcox?
Thank you.
Dr. Jackson.
Regarding Mr. Claypool, he was one of the attorneys that I used in putting together our draft, and I would also second his appointment. Thank you.
Okay. All of that said, now I'm going to get back on the agenda. That was a little rabbit trail. You will find that I love rabbit trails. I never catch the rabbit, but the trails are always. Item 7 is the election of the chair and vice chair. What would be the will of the body?
The selection of the, are you asking us?
Yes. Yes. Okay. That's you guys.
I would move to delay that until all members are seated.
Anybody, Mr. Smith, you have a position? Mr. Vice Chair?
I was thinking so we could try to expedite some things and just keep a nice flow going. It might be good to keep the same ones in place so we don't have to worry about any turnover at this particular time, especially since we have new members and we're trying to also get a new attorney. It may be good to at least keep the other aspects, the leadership of the board in place.
All right, and
I would second that.
Was that a motion? Did you make a motion?
I don't think that was a motion. I'm not taking that as a second, but I will take it as we go around the table for discussion.
There's no discussion.
Mr. Chair, is this something that needs to be addressed during this meeting?
Yes, ma'am. We have to. Our operating procedures say that we will select the chair in December. We did not do that. We delayed it last time by motion and a vote until this meeting. So we have to make some decision at this meeting. We can decide not to decide and delay, or we can decide it's two-thirds, or we can go ahead and make a decision, nominate a chair, nominate a vice chair, and select them. Those are our two options under our existing procedures. This is one we can't ignore.
Okay. My feeling is that since you have had lengthy experience and we are going through such, I understand you've been the chair for a while, correct? Am I correct or incorrect? Do you wish me to say we don't want you to be the chair, Mr. Chair?
I think you would, but
That's not going to happen. I think given the transition, and I appreciate your comments as well, but I believe given that there is such a transition and so many new members are coming on board, having your experience in this position remain to help navigate what is going to be essentially a completely new board with the exception of 2 members, correct? Would be very valuable to the Ethics Board in general. But I appreciate your comments, but if we can achieve this with a 2/3 vote with those who are here today, I would vote in favor, whether you like it or not, Mr. Chair, of you remaining as the chair of the Ethics Board.
hold your arm out so she can twist it.
Dr. Bouchon,
Yes, sir.
would that give you great consternation?
No, and that's what essentially I was advocating for, was delaying the vote.
Well, she's not talking about delaying the vote. She's talking about going ahead and
voting now.
Reconfirming me as chair and Mr. Smith as vice chair in today's meeting, so we would run through the calendar year.
Okay.
What you said was the other option that occurred to me, which I put on the sheet. I think those are the two. We got to pick one of those two paths, I think.
Well, I understand that, and I was looking for continuity of leadership when I was saying let's hold off on it. If I know you don't want to, but if it's in the best interest of the board for us to reconfirm you now, then let's do that.
Okay.
You want to make a motion?
Can I ask you? First of all, I'm probably way too casual because that's just how I operate. But how do you pronounce your last name, Doctor?
Oh, it's Bouchon.
Bouchon.
Yeah. Close enough. I answered any variation, but
Dr. Bouchon, I think given that you and I are the 2 new members and we are going to have 2 new members, and we're going to be the veteran members very quickly, that having someone who has served in this capacity and I think has the support and respect of, I'm seeing nods in the audience, which is very, very positive about you, Mr. Chair, that it would make sense to go ahead and confirm this tonight, and then as the new members come on, we can all be learning together under his leadership and the vice chair's leadership.
let's do it.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do then is, Mr. Smith, I'm going to convert yours to a motion. You recommend that we maintain the current chair and vice chair.
Sorry. Hey, no one put me up to this.
Actually, I think the second was by Ms. McNeil that I didn't take. So we have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay.
You said no.
Huh?
To yourself, did you?
Yeah, it only takes 2/3, right? Just to me, I think Mr. Smith is great. But what I do fully intend to do is put back on the agenda something about June or so after everybody's been here for a month or two, and we'll look at this again, Ms. Meadows.
Oh, term limits for chairs?
No, there's nothing that says we can't appoint a new chair in the middle of the year. But we'll give all the new members a chance to see what they think, and me a chance to see if I can't straighten out the ethics advocates a little bit. Okay, so that finishes item 7. Item 8 is board council. So, does anyone have any preferences on how we would proceed with selecting the board council?
Mr. Chair, is this a paid position or pro bono?
It is paid.
Okay.
Yeah, we pay, and they always submit an hourly basis, so it's hourly attorney rates. I think the last couple of attorneys we've paid about $275 an hour or so, or less if they use legal assistance in their firm, whatever. But we're paying. But they have also, both of them, one for only a couple of months, but the other for several years. They were very conservative, I would tell you, in their billings with us.
As someone who's dealt with billable hours, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a very good
thing. Very good thing.
I'm looking over this, and I would, option 2 has a cost benefit and a time benefit to it, but I think if we select option 2 to the exclusion of option 3, some talent might be excluded.
That based on testimony tonight, I believe that would be true.
Then I would take your advice on moving away from option 4, and so if I may, then I would tender out there that we do the advertising using the simplified criteria with a fairly quick application, sufficient enough that we can get the interest, but not so long that it drags out. That way we can look at it, especially if we're looking to come back here on the 7th or somewhere in that time.
Okay. Mr. Smith, opinion?
No, I would agree with that. Option 3 would be my choice.
Okay.
3.
They're saying option 3.
Okay.
Ms. McNeil?
Concur with number 3.
Ms. Graham?
Agree.
Okay, then if this is okay, let's leave up to Julie to get something posted. I think it's okay also for her to notify people that we know are interested, who we know are interested, which would clearly include the last couple of bidders and a couple of names that we may have heard about tonight. I think that the criteria can be very broad based on the last procurement that we did. It would be basically, we would want to know your knowledge, skills, and expertise. We would want you to tell us what your knowledge, skills, and expertise, particularly in the areas of ethics and government, in particular local government. We would want to know, we obviously want someone licensed to practice law in the state of Florida. And then if there's anything else significant, but I think just basically those things, and their pricing. And then what we will do is before our next meeting, we will get whatever applications we get in for, and probably also how they would provide for backup if they were unavailable for one of our meetings, to make sure that we are not like we are tonight with an empty chair. We'll tell them we want to cover at least those things, and anything else, if anybody has anything else they want to add. We'll talk about that later. Okay. And so you'll get some kind of ad or phone calls out to people with and get a timely response. Each of us will get each of the applications. You can use whatever criteria you think are important in evaluating those, and we will come in and we will have a public discussion and we will pick somebody at our next meeting.
Very good.
Meets. We didn't do them. So I got nods down here. I'm going to take a motion from Dr. Bichon, a second from Mr. Smith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, so we're moving on the board attorney. Then the last thing, which is not on the agenda, is this idea of doing an additional meeting. Now, basically what that does is buy us a month. If we don't do an additional meeting, we'll come in, we'll select these people in February, and by March we'll be ready to go with our recommendations to the City Commission. If we do have a special meeting, then presumably in February we could be taking up the recommendations. We'd have all 7 members here and our board attorney. So it's a matter of, do we want to have an extra meeting for those of us sitting here in order to buy ourselves a month? I think I know the position of the advocates, which is have a special meeting. I think that was what we heard. But I have no idea what people's availability is, and also 2 new people, the longer you have to look at this, what started off as our blue sky list, probably the better. So how would you all prefer to proceed?
Well, I'm in favor of having the second meeting. I know we all have schedules and everything else, but so that way when we convene in February at our regular meeting, it is a full empaneled representation of what we are. Although if we're going to do that, I would wager or like to suggest then that this meeting is very limited in its scope. We come in, we do our business, and once that is concluded, that's it, and then we can come back, later on and address any other normal issues. But that would be my suggestion to the board.
Anyone else? Opinions? Suggestions?
Can we just define the limited scope of what the meeting will be so that we
I think it would be those 2 things, precisely those 2 things would be on the agenda. Okay. If there's an ancillary issue that directly relates to our ability to make one of those 2 decisions, but nothing else.
And it would be in a more casual setting, not.
We'd probably get one of the smaller meeting
We'd get a
rooms.
smaller room. We wouldn't be in the chamber.
Okay.
Sitting around the table, everybody can come sit at the table with us. And of course, obviously, we'd make all the applications available to anybody who wants them to review also. I'm seeing nods on an additional meeting. Does anyone have we have these are both 5 to 8 time slots, Thursday, February 7th, and Monday, February 11th. Does anyone have a particular?
No, those are evenings. I'm good for whatever is convenient for the board.
I'm open both days.
Okay, let's shoot for Thursday the 7th. If there is a problem, notify the ethics officer, and she'll get with everybody else, and we'll push to the 11th. If something comes up that is a conflict, because with 5 of us, well, actually, we might have 6 members by the 7th. But we will plan then on a special meeting on the 7th to address those 2 and only those 2 topics.
Same time as our normal meeting?
It'll be 5 to 7, and it'll be in a room probably on this floor.
Okay.
Yep.
So a little bit later.
Okay.
We, when we're not in this time slot, we compete for space with lots of other groups, and particularly work groups of city employees who are trying to get work done. So, okay, who have I skipped? Mr. Batzine, anything? Dr. Hollifield. I have a card from you, Dr. Hollifield, on unagended items, which is where we are.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
The first thing I'd like to say is that there are some things in this town that are just unredeemable. And one of them would be the CRA. The CRA shouldn't be improved. You should just get rid of it. There's no way to improve it. And it's doing a lot of harm. CRA has been in existence for 18 years. And during that period, what has happened to poverty in this town? It's gotten worse. If the CRA was doing a lot of good, why is poverty in Leon County increasing? So much so that Leon County has the highest degree of income inequality, second highest level of income inequality of all the counties in the state of Florida. Why is that? And I'll tell you why. It's because you give all the money to people that already have it. So you increase income inequality. Money to Ron Sachs, Seminole Boosters, Doubletree Hotel, North American Properties. Millions. And on and on and on and on. Yet, if you look at Census Tract 10.01 on the south side, a childhood poverty rate that has been as high as 80.1. That's third world poverty. It's like Guatemala, right here in Leon County. We have a 25% overall childhood hunger rate. And you talk about reforming the CRA? No way. The other thing is there needs to be transparency. A lot of people don't even know, for example, that the city owns Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. The city owns the hospital through a diabolical lease agreement, $1 a year, racist lease agreement. The city gets to approve the people on the board of directors. But it never does. It accepts all of the recommendations from TMH by consent. What's the result? You got a 20-member board of directors at a hospital that you own, 20 members, without a single black woman on the board. 7 white women, 0 blacks. No blacks who live in the black community. I don't think TMH has had a black member on the board who's lived in the black community in its history. And I'm not, just saying any black. I mean, it wouldn't do any good if it was a Curtis Richardson type black. I'm talking about somebody who's going to be an advocate for the black community on the board. There's no excuse to have a 20-member board and no black women when you consider all of the infant mortality in this town. That hasn't gone away. All of the maternal mortality in this town, that hasn't gone away. I had to fight like hell to get TMH to get that infant formula out of the hospital delivery bags because it was undercutting breastfeeding. And it goes on and on and on and on. Lack of transparency, contamination on the south side. The city didn't deal with it when Big Ben Cares, spread all that stuff around rather than clean it up. I had to report it to DEP. The city didn't do anything. The county didn't do anything. There's a lack of transparency. The CRA meetings, I had to fight like hell to get those broadcast on WCOT. They weren't being televised. They weren't being televised until I made an issue of it. And they hand out millions and millions and millions of dollars, and it was being done in the dark. At least now it goes out on Channel 13. So there's a profound lack of just basically transparency in this town. The other thing is you don't follow your own rules. You don't follow your own rules. There's a development agreement between, for example, Big Ben Cares and the CRA staff. I don't think anybody's read it. Because if so, you'd know that they're in default of that agreement. They were supposed to produce an annual report by December 18th, 2018. That annual report hasn't been produced. They were supposed to return property to the Frenchtown CRA. They were supposed to do that at closing. That hasn't taken place. Supposed to exercise non-discrimination. Well, if I go down to the CRA, to Big Ben Care's care point, I get arrested. I had 2 Tallahassee police called on me for going to a ribbon cutting. And you don't know about it because the Democrat never reported on it. You have Sylvia Hubbard, who's been threatened with arrest if she shows up at that care point facility, even though there's a non-discrimination clause in the development agreement. It's like it's just ignored. So I think that, number one, you need to make sure that when these agreements are promulgated, that somebody reads them. Because right now, CarePoint, for example, is in default of the agreement, but they continue to receive money even though they are in default of the development agreement. And Julie knows what I'm talking about because I brought it to her attention. It's written into an agreement. If you don't do certain things, you're under default of the agreement. Well, CarePoint is in default based on the annual report, the anti-discrimination clause in the contract, and also the exchange property, which should have been returned to the black community, the Frenchtown CRA, at closing, which more than a year ago. And it hasn't been done yet. It hasn't been done yet. So if you wonder why there's so little faith in local government, you don't have to look any further than the situation with Tallahassee Memorial Hospital or with CarePoint. Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, they get to use more than $1 billion worth of assets via $1 a year lease agreement that nobody knows about. Nobody knows about. That's a pretty good business model if you can get it. For $1 a year, TMH gets to control more than $1 billion worth of assets and maintains a board of directors that has no black women on it. On a 20-member board. Only 2 blacks of any kind, of any stripe.
Sir, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
The 20-member board of Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, is that elected?
They have to be approved by the city commission, but they do it by consent. The last time they came up was not all that long ago. Laurie Dozier of Mad Dog Construction had been on forever when a position became vacant because Wayne Batchelor left. Guess what TMH did? They put on another white man, not a black woman. So they had an opportunity. They had an opportunity to put a black woman on that board. And what did TMH do? They put on a white woman. I mean, a white man. It's unfortunate we have to talk in all these terms. And what else did they do? They paid Malcolm Bryant more than $1.2 million as CEO, while they paid the janitors reportedly $9.25 an hour. TMH creates poverty in this town. $1.2 million for Malcolm Bryant to run a D-rated hospital that you own. D-rated hospital, according to Leapfrog, which Consumer Reports uses to evaluate patient safety at hospitals. That's a public safety hazard. But y'all don't know about it. Democrat didn't say nothing about it until I dropped that information in their lap. But that's your hospital. Y'all want to go to a D-rated hospital in terms of public safety that you own? And nothing is said about it? And people don't know about it because they don't even know about that $1 a year? The new commissioner said he had no idea. No idea that there was $1 a year lease agreement between the city of Tallahassee and Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. There is so little basic transparency in this town.
Let me ask you another question.
Sure.
I'm hearing a lot of frustration on your part, rightfully so. Okay, a number of the things that you have brought up here so far might actually contain elements of certain statutory violations that are going to be outside the scope of this board, if I'm understanding the board's role here. One, we're independent. All right, we're independent of pretty much anybody else in the fact that we're able to take a look at things, but we don't own the hospital. The hospital doesn't report to this board. Okay.
You do own the hospital. You own the land, the buildings in it, and damn near everything inside the building.
We don't. Okay?
No, I'm saying the citizens of Tallahassee. The citizens of Tallahassee own the hospital.
What I may recommend to you to do, though, and again, I'm totally on the outside, so board members, correct me if I'm wrong in offering this piece of advice to you, Dr. Hollifield. Put your complaints specifically in writing. Turn them over to Julie, the ethics officer, and then allow us to look at it in writing. There's a lot of frustration. Some of the things that you're talking about may be ethical. Some of them may be criminal. But unless you're willing to put the pen to the paper and then submit it to this board for consideration, I would wager to say that we don't have any avenue by which to investigate what you're bringing forth.
Like Irvin Jackson, been there, done that.
New board,
put this in writing.
New board,
and I've sent it to Julie.
Okay, I haven't seen it. Like I told you, this is my first official board meeting.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'll do, because I had, for example, recommended a long time ago that the communications department, or whatever, that they put that $1 a year lease agreement on the website. Why not put it on talgov.com? So that everybody can see it. And since you own the hospital, not only that, but that you put the Form 990 on the hospital, on the website. I mean, that's just a good business practice. You own the hospital. Hospital has to file a Form 990 with the Internal Revenue Service to justify their supposed not-for-profit status. But they got all other kind of unconsequential stuff on talgov.com. Why not put the TMH Form 990 on there since you're on the hospital and that $1 a year lease agreement that nobody knows about? But I will be glad, you just tell me what you want to do. Have Julie send me an email telling me exactly what you want to do. But I've sent all this information to Julie.
We cannot ask the ethics officer to tell you what to do, sir. That would be contrary to our position. What I'm asking you to do is send it in, allow this board to reconsider it.
Just tell me exactly what you want.
Well, no, sir, it doesn't work that way. What I'm saying to you is those items and those issues that you feel should be under the purview of this board for consideration, that you take the initiative to delineate those, identify those, and do it clearly. Point one, this is, and then you tell us. Point two, and then you tell us. So that way we can address it and we can go down and we can look at these. And if we identify particular issues, we'll address those issues appropriately. Now, it may be that, we do get some more authorities that we're able to investigate, all right? But when you write these things out, what I would recommend that you do is that you would look in 112, Florida State statutes, look at the ethics. If you think that maybe there's some things going on, like you just indicated to me, potential theft with the CRA in Frenchtown and so on and so forth, well, you need to go to Chapter 800 in Florida statutes, and the point being here is give us something to work with, something specific.
Well, let's get the language right. I didn't say potential theft.
Okay.
I said they have contributed to income inequality because they give away all this money to people that already haven't. That's different than theft.
Well, you said something about not giving property back at a closing.
Oh, no. That has to do with the fact that Big Ben Cares is a not-for-profit organization.
So it's a 501c3.
No. The problem is some of this is fairly complex. Big Ben Cares is a not-for-profit organization. The CRA operates on something called tax increment financing. So they use the increment in property taxes supposedly to do projects to assist the community, whether it be black, white, purple, whatever. But in the case of Big Ben Cares, they gave them $1.5 million, which really doesn't make any sense. They gave it to a not-for-profit organization, which means there will be no tax increment to the black community. There will be no tax increment financing because not-for-profits don't pay taxes. So to get around that, given the fact that the black community was just being, completely abused by giving all $1.5 million to a not-for-profit organization that doesn't have to pay taxes anyhow, accordingly, no tax increment financing, the development agreement between Big Ben Cares and the CRA said that, okay, we will just give. We will give the CRA a piece of property or some property to make up for the fact that because they're a not-for-profit organization, they aren't going to gain anything. That so-called exchange property, and Julie should be able to explain all this to you, in that development agreement, which was promulgated on January 24th, 2017, they said that they would provide the black community, Frenchtown community, with that property to try to compensate for the fact that there was not going to be any tax increment to benefit the black community because they don't pay no taxes. That should have been returned by closing, according to the agreement. It should have been returned by closing. It has yet to be returned. It has yet to be returned. And that's why I say they are in default of the agreement. The agreement has a specific default clause. But they have continued to receive a portion of that $1.5 million, even though they are in default. They received the last payment in November of 2018, even while they were in default. So how can that be? I'm not saying theft. I'm saying that the agreement in and of itself didn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense. $1.5 million to a not-for-profit organization, knowing that the black community would not benefit from any tax increment, the so-called TIF, a tax increment financing, is not going to apply to us. It's not going to apply to us. So, I didn't say theft. What I'm saying is it was a bad agreement from the very beginning. Why would $1.5 million go to a not-for-profit organization when the not-for-profit doesn't pay any taxes? Can somebody explain that to me? It doesn't make any sense. Does it make any sense to you, Gwen Graham? Welcome to the
Dr. Holyfield.
welcome to what happens in the city of Tallahassee.
Dr. Holyfield, it's a pleasure to see you again, sir. And I appreciate your concerns and your commitment on these issues. And one of the questions that was raised earlier in this meeting is the nature of the CRA vis-a-vis the Independent Ethics Board. And I would certainly appreciate, as a new member of this board, clarification on that question so that as additional citizens come before us, we can know where we can actually weigh in or whether we have the authority to weigh in. And I appreciate, it's good to see you again, sir.
Well, one thing I would suggest is that even when you don't have authority, because every time I come up here, this is it's not the only time I've come up here. Even when you say you don't have the authority, you still have the ability to make recommendations.
Well, that's why I'm asking as a new member to get clarification on that. And I thank you very much for your time and your commitment to this community, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're recognized. Yes, ma'am.
Catherine Bear, I would like to make a recommendation that's going to kneecap all of us, that we limit public input to maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops per person, because, I mean, if we can't speak concisely and to the point, then I shouldn't be getting up here.
That was very concise.
Thank you. I like the 5-minute idea.
Last, I think you're up. Mr. Sims, I think you're the last speaker.
After sitting through that, I can understand, but I don't agree. Because I don't know what holds tomorrow to me. And I had to bear that, but I look at his younger years of what he's done for this community. I'm just answering. And so when I look at what he did yesterday compared to what he's doing today, I thank God for grace and mercy. And I'm going to just leave that there. My reason why I'm here today is, one, I am seeking a recommendation. As you know, I did tell you all that I will keep you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for being talked into serving as chairman. I'm asking for a recommendation today because I did also inform you as well as Ms. Keefe that I will keep you informed abreast of the progress of my complaint. Well, as of Friday, my complaint, I was notified, was put in impasse. Now, here is what is challenging to me, because this is what I believe is in the realm of unethical acts of a public official or of a city manager. I have spoken with the auditor and presented to him the evidence that I believe that the city manager act and not in good faith, which when you are a public figure or an elected official, as you just said, Ms. Graham, and as your husband keeps making me think I'm a public official because he keeps trying to make me think and act better in the public, you have to hold yourself to a certain decor, and that you give people, when you give people your word, that your word means something because you are an elected official in the realm of the power that you have, and you can't misrepresent that. And even in your code of ethics says that if you misuse that authority, then there are damages. And I apologize if I had to go the long way, but I want to explain myself. We went into mediation. I sent, which you have a copy of, the settlement offer, the terms and conditions, preconditions of saying, because you have, and I apologize to you, Mr. Lee, and I'm just going to say Lee because I would probably murder your last name. You don't know the history, and you would probably get caught up with Julie. She has all of the information. But because there has been a history of the city not following through with what they say and doing it in a timely manner, I asked for certain things to be done up front prior to the meeting. And it was in writing. I sent it in writing, and it was agreed to by the mediator. And so when we got to mediation on last Tuesday, I used the word impasse only twice. That's when the city manager came to me, well, when the city manager, while the mediator explained the rules, when he was doing his opening statement, he alluded that he was not going, that he explained that what he explained was different than what we agreed to. And so I immediately brought it to the attention of the mediator and said, if this is why we're here, then I feel that I've been deceptive because this is not how I asked to come, and this is not what I agreed to. At that point in the mediation, the city manager confirmed to me in front of the media that the Chief Gaines had the authority to deal with all of these remaining issues. We continue with the mediation. Signed off. I'm fast tracking out of great respect for my friend. We signed off on what we agreed with an understanding in the room, Mr. Lee, that there were certain things that we had agreed to that we needed to work out the logistics. And then also to come back to say, because I did offer some negotiating rooms with some things of some final details that needed to be fine-tuned. So we signed off on this on that Tuesday, and Wednesday, nothing was happening. Thursday, nothing was happening. So I began to get anxious, and I called. And on Friday, the chief was acting as if he was not sure he had the authority to carry these things out. And so, even though my son was flying in from Great Lakes, Chicago, scheduled to be here in Tallahassee at 3, I was on the 4th floor with Miss Cynthia Barber and the city manager. And the city manager told me in front of now the deputy city manager, Cynthia Barber, that he apologized for Chief Gaines' misunderstanding. He had been under the weather, and that he would reach out to him and let him know that he had full authority to resolve these issues that we signed on, and Chief Gaines is one of the signing signatures of this. I received another call from Chief Gaines that I felt was unethical outside of the mediation, especially with the confusion. So I received a call about 6 o'clock from the from what do you call the people? The mediator, to inform me that we did some more precondition to come back again in order to get clarity on these things and word back from city officials. And so she called me to inform me that we was to meet again to iron out these things. Then right after she called me and told me that we were going to meet, she then called me back. Oh, and then about 40 minutes later, I looked at my computer and I got a letter saying that we were at an impasse because I refused to negotiate. Now, why am I bringing this? And Gwen, one, I do know as I've just told this story, it is out of your privy. I do understand that. But number two, what puts it in your privy is that when an elected official stands in his capacity in which he stood inside of that mediation and spoke those words, he spoke as a city official. This is a matter that involves more than $25. There's been witnessing tampering with this situation. There has been unethical violators done in this. Yeah, when I say witness tampering, let me explain that. A part of the maneuvering, and I'm being very nice, I have a tie on.
That's good.
Shenanigans or hook wing or buff stuff. You don't call outside of mediation to me and tell me, will you take this? And if I were you, I would take it because some of the witnesses are changing their statement. So if you're telling me that some of the witnesses, and I've already reported this incident to the auditor, and I've also reported it to HR, that if you're telling me that some of the witnesses are changing some of their statements, then what that's saying to me, and I don't mean disrespect, Miss Graham, is that you are conducted an investigation. And Mr. Lee, according to the process, you're not supposed to engage into the investigation unless there has been a determination of an impasse. Now, the determination of the impasse was on Friday. So how could Chief Gaines already know what the story was, and how did he know that some of the employees have already changed their story? That's a question that needs to be answered. But it definitely shows that there has been a breach in the system. And I think that you have all of this except for the signed agreement.
I have copies of it, yes, sir.
You have copies of the signed agreement?
None of the signed agreement, but I have copies of the other.
I would. But, sir, what I am asking to do is for a recommendation of this board is that we need to ask, and it's so unbecoming because we don't have one, but someone needs to act out. Someone needs to give an account to this board what broke down in the review process, that when citizens are told by officials to trust them in this sensitive manner, that system should maintain its integrity. Now, this organization back here is entitled Citizen for Integrity, but this municipality should deliver integrity, especially, Mr. Chairman, its history. Mr. Lee, I beg of you to read the complaint. The complaint is about me being able to come in this building because he felt like I was enemy combatant. The complaint is about how a city employee cursed me out and nothing happened. The complaint is about how I called the mayor's office and a city employee misrepresented himself and his position. He even lied to me, Ms. Graham, and told me he was a supervisor and he would not put my call through to the mayor's office, that I had to speak to security. Now, the First Amendment right, me as a citizen, and unfortunately, I'm not on Section 8. I come from Section 8. I'm not ashamed of coming from Section 8. But I own property here. I own property on Mickisiki Road. It's about 1.25 acres, Mr. Lee. I bought it because it was passed down in our family, and I was able to raise my kids on Mickisiki Road on 1/4 acre of land in a single-wide trailer just so that they would be in good schools. That's the sacrifice I made. And so I'm not understanding why this board cannot provide a recommendation of some type to look into the integrity process of mediations for citizens, because the proof is here. There were preconditioned terms that were set, and they were violated. And Mr. Lee, they were not violated by the secretary. They were violated by the city manager. They were violated by the fire chief. That is in your privy. Now, I don't know what words to make it sexy. That's what y'all get paid all the big bucks for. But I know when I've been discriminated against. I don't need a master's degree or a PhD degree to just let me know when I've been discriminated against.
All right, Mr. Sims, allow me for a moment. Ms. Julie, I'm sorry. Meadowskeef, thank you. May you pass that along to us as well.
I'm sorry.
The copy of the complaint.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Sims, I appreciate your candor and the courage it takes you to come forward here. I saw you at the last meeting too. All right, thank you for exercising that right. I would wager to say, allow us to review it. At least us new members, new eyes, maybe new directions. I can't tell you that, but at least we'll review it. Okay. That's a good thing, sir.
Yes, and not for no reflection on you. We had 2 more homicides this weekend.
We did.
How many parents is going to have to review bodies before we can just do what's right? And I know what, and I'm just, this is where I get in very trouble, but I think that this is complicated when we choose to make it complicated. And I just think that all I'm asking from this board right here tonight, I want the same grotesque that this board sent a sounding letter to the city manager when Rick Fernandez went to that football game. Hold on. They sent a sounding letter. Mr. Holloman came back and talked about the lack of culture of how they did not view their ethical position. And so I'm just having I find it challenging. We've got 4 incidents, living incidents, where clear discrimination based on race of an individual that they don't like.
Mr. Chairman, has this been
and we're
investigated
slowful
already?
about that.
I mean, is this a valid issue, a viable
Yes.
living? No, excuse me, sir, a minute. Or has it been put to bed already?
Well, let's let Mr. Sims finish, and I'll.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
She's saying I've lost you and I'm gone.
No.
But
please finish. I wanted to see where we were previously.
And I'm sorry, but I'm disappointed that I did exactly, and I'm not putting you on the spot, Mr. Heron, but you coached me And her husband coached me, and I did all these things, these good things y'all told me to do, and said, trust the process. Well, the process, look what the process did to me. It came out and started saying, oh, you're the bad guy. And I'm like, what? And so now you come back, we'll review it. What the hell is, excuse me, what is there to review? I mean, to me, it is he saying what he's saying is true? If that is true, Julie, we want to send a letter to HR to give us an account of why this is at an impasse. That's all you have to say. I don't have your money. No. No, I ain't met one of them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Stanley.
Dr. Jackson.
I'm most ready to support a 5-minute limit myself. I got two things. One, we've been reading about Scott Maddox, the investigations. There was an interesting, something came out. They were talking about a local businessman said he was being shaken down, and he complained regarding the CRA to Christian Dozier. That would be clearly a criminal matter. She tells the head of CRA. The head of CRA tells the city attorney. The city attorney tells the city manager, and not a thing takes place for the most part. They did an investigation, and I was busy. I wasn't able to bring the letter. Maybe you folks have seen the letter, the investigation that was conducted by the city manager. Okay, let me tell you now. I will try to get you a copy of it. The letter was written. On the top, it had no name to who the letter was sent to. It talked about some interviews that were conducted, and Scott said, no, I'm a good guy. I didn't do anything wrong. And then on the bottom, where you would sign who wrote or who signed it, who actually did the investigation, it was blank. Now, this letter, we don't know who it was sent to. We don't know who did it. And it's been covered up since 2014. That's the kind of investigation that leads a private citizen very concerned about our elected officials, city manager, city attorney. Do I trust any of them? No. I think we should look into that letter because some of the same people are here that was involved in that. And if that's the investigation that people are doing, we have a problem. So my question to you is when a person is an employee or a private citizen goes to their supervisor and said, I believe this is a criminal matter, we should have some direction, I think, from this board, referring a criminal matter to the city manager or a city attorney is not enough. We had a Dozier, a county commissioner, not a single person went ahead and contacted the sheriff's office. I think we should have a direct link. If there's a criminal matter, it should be referred, and whether it's a city manager, city attorney must make that referral because it's in their best interest not to have some of this stuff come to light of day. As we see the 44 criminal counts against Scott Maddox. Now, he's innocent. I can tell you he's guilty as all get out, but we'll decide that for sure in a courtroom. That, I think, is critical. We can't just continue to say, throw it up to the city manager's office, they'll cover it up. They've done that for almost 20 years. Second thing, I don't know if you know or not, Mr. Tadros was here, and Mr. Tadros was kind of the bag man for Rick Fernandez. He was the enforcer. When Mr. Fernandez wanted his swimming pool fixed, he called Tadros, and Tadros sent out city employees to fix it. When Mr. Fernandez wanted new pipes, plumbing done on his daughter's house, his house that he rented to his daughter, Mr. Tadros was contacted, and he sent 8 or 10 men out there to do the work. Now, we've got testimony from all those people who participated. That needs to be investigated, and I realize that occurred before you were here. But it explains the concern I have. What did happen is after Mr. Tadros retired, he was just rehired, getting paid $85, $95 an hour. Now, by the city attorney. Why is the city attorney hiring the ex-head of underground utilities? Good question. You look at the contract that he signed, they hired him to help her prepare a defense against potential criminal charges from the FBI. Now think about that a little bit. I'm just sharing that with you. I think it's a serious problem. These guys are not giving up. They're continuing to hide, to lie, deceive. And there's no way this person has any legal background. He's probably a participant in criminal activities. And I think by him being employees, he's able to get the legal protection. We can use city money to pay for his lawyers. So I'd appreciate anyone who's interested to look into that. I certainly am. There's a report I just had posted in Tallahassee Reports about it for more details. Thank you.
Just for the benefit of the new members, we have struggled when the board was initially created. As I said, we had virtually no ethics jurisdiction. But we did get an opinion from our then legal counsel who said that anything that occurred before the existence of the board, before the existence of the city ethics code, would not be something that we could look at or opine on. Subsequently, about a year and a half ago, Ms. Meadows-Keefe, we got jurisdiction, and it is we asked for jurisdiction over misuse of position. What we got was jurisdiction over misuse of position by elected or appointed city officials, which is 9 people. And that misuse of position had to be, I'm blanking on the word.
Corrupt intent.
It had to be done corruptly.
Instead of knowingly and intentionally.
We had asked for intentionally. So corruptly is obviously a much higher legal standard. And it has been difficult for us as we look at what is within our jurisdiction to see activities of any one of those 9 people where we have clear evidence that the activity was for their benefit and was done corruptly. It can have been done negligently, it can have been done maliciously, but as long as it wasn't done corruptly, it doesn't fall within our jurisdiction. So that's one of the big reasons for the recommendations that we want to make to expand the jurisdiction, both looking at the number of people and the activities that might fall within our jurisdiction. Those have been frustrations for us as well as for the people you've heard from tonight who have been, most of them, regular presenters at this board. So that said, just as background. We will talk more about that when we get our other 2 new members. We probably need to schedule a session just to go over some of the history of the board. As we always do, is there any other comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none. Board members, anytime you have any item that you want included on an agenda, you can bring it to the board meeting, or you can simply call Ms. Meadows-Keefe in between board meetings and say, please make sure to get this on the agenda. And unless there is something that she knows that, if we've got a jam-up board meeting and you've got something that's just, a non-time critical issue, she might talk you into delaying, but otherwise anything you want on an agenda will be on the agenda. So that's it. If anybody else has anything, seeing nothing, we are adjourned.
Thank you.